are confirming that most of the flights are taking off again on time. So that's a big story that we continue to track right here on News9 as well as on the show this morning. Also on the show, 9:15 or so, we should get live visuals of Meesho's listing on NSE today. 10 a.m. is when the stock is expected to list. Is it going to live up to the GMP expectations of about 32% or not? We will get to know only after the stock finally hits the charts this morning. And of course, the latest update coming in on the Anil Ambani fraud case. His son Anmol Singh Ambani has now, Anmol Ambani has now been issued a criminal notice by CBI. So that is another story that we are bringing to you on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Thank you for staying tuned in. You are watching Morning Brief at 9 this Wednesday morning. These are the headlines that we're following for you. The centre orders IndiGo to cut winter flight schedule by 10%. That's the big development that came yesterday after we heard that the government has also enforced fare cap and passenger convenience measures as the government cracks down on cancellations and delays by IndiGo Airlines. Meanwhile, IndiGo CEO Pieter Elbers and top management are likely to appear before the inquiry committee initiated by DGCA today. Prime Minister Modi says rules should improve systems, not burden citizens, as centre vows strict action on IndiGo amid 10 days almost of cancellations as well as refunds, which seem to be sketchy. In other news, India aims to become a global leader in 6G patents and standards as Union Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia reviews the Bharat 6G mission progress. Indian exporters downplay US tariff threat on rice, say minimal impact expected as America forms under 1% of India's total rice exports. India opts a multi-pronged strategy to ease impact of US tariffs, pushes for trade pact with Washington and accelerates free trade agreement talks with EU, Peru, Chile, New Zealand and Oman while boosting support for exporters. Prime Minister Modi holds back-to-back meetings with Microsoft, Cognizant and Intel CEOs as India pushes AI, chip manufacturing and digital infrastructure growth. Microsoft announces a record $17.5 billion investment in India. Trade unions call for phased protests and announce nationwide general strike in February to demand withdrawal of labour codes as worker groups and farmers intensify mobilization against new labour laws. And the CBI registers the first criminal case against Anil Ambani, son of industrialist Anil Ambani, in Reliance Housing Finance fraud probe, alleging diversion of bank loans and 228 crore rupees loss flagged by Union Bank forensic audit. In a big development, IndiGo CEO Pieter Elbers and top management are likely to appear before the inquiry committee today. Remember, the centre has taken tough action on IndiGo as the government ordered the airline to slash its winter flight schedule by 10%, marking a major escalation after the earlier 5% cut imposed by the DGCA over mass delays and cancellations. In a post on social media platform X, Civil Aviation Minister Rammohan Naidu said the decision was necessary to stabilize airline operations and bring down cancellations that have left thousands, if not lakhs, of passengers stranded over the past 1 week. He said that the ministry believes trimming routes now will ease pressure on the system and keep all existing destinations covered just with fewer flights. Naidu also stressed that IndiGo must follow every directive issued. That includes fare caps, so ticket prices don't surge due to fewer flights, and passenger convenience measures, from on-ground assistance to timely handling of luggage. The government wants clear compliance and fast. Meanwhile, IndiGo CEO Pieter Elbers says the airline has already processed 100% refunds for passengers affected till 6th December and has been told to expedite pending refunds and baggage returns for those still waiting. CEO Pieter Elbers was summoned yet again on Wednesday by the Aviation Ministry as disruptions, cancellations and refund concerns continue to dominate India's airline sector. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has addressed the ongoing IndiGo crisis, stressing that government rules must exist to improve systems. At a meeting of NDA lawmakers, Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiren Rijiju shared that the Prime Minister reminded leaders that governance should never become a burden for the very people it serves. He said rules and regulations are good, but they must not harass the public. This comes as the government prepares for a heated debate on electoral reforms, but airlines, especially IndiGo, remain firmly in focus. Remember, Civil Aviation Minister Rammohan Rayadu had earlier said that the ministry will crack down on IndiGo, even making an example of the carrier, which has already refunded over 830 crore rupees and seen a sharp slide in its market value as well. Passenger frustration has been rising amid flight delays and cancellations, many involving urgent travel from medical needs to family emergencies. The airline, which handles more than 60% of India's domestic aviation market, is struggling to recover from operational setbacks linked to new crew fatigue management norms. The government says it will not tolerate non-compliance and any future slip-ups will invite strict action. And moving on now, India is gearing up to play a leading role in the global race for 6G technologies. As Union Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia said, the country is progressing with confidence towards becoming a major force in defining global 6G patents and standards. Scindia chaired a meeting of the Apex Council under the Bharat 6G mission, where he reviewed the ongoing work of the Bharat 6G Alliance. He wrote on X that the mission is moving ahead with phase-wise goals, independent evaluations and continuous review, ensuring that the benefits of 6G reach every citizen across the nation. Then they added that effective collaboration between industries, startups and academia is key to India's push towards becoming not just a technology user but a technology creator. The meeting saw participation from top officials including Minister of State for Communication, Telecom Secretary Neeraj Mittal and representatives from ministries, telecom operators, R&D institutions and the Bharat 6G Alliance. Officials highlighted that the alliance has already released 8 technical reports covering key areas such as spectrum, AI native networks, green telecom, RF sensing and next generation applications.
What we're doing here is we're leapfrogging. We weren't there in 2G, we weren't there in 3G, we weren't there in 4G. We finally made it in 5G. And now we've made it to the club of 4G equipment makers. Only 4 in the world, we are the 5th. So we're leapfrogging. What you guys are doing in 6G is actually a leapfrog. And it's not a leapfrog for you guys in the industry alone. It's a leapfrog for India, and I dare say it's a leapfrog for the world.
All right, meanwhile, India's rice sector is dismissing concerns over a possible tariff hike from the United States. Exporters say even if Washington moves ahead with imposing additional duties, it won't shake the market. The India Rice Exporter Federation says exports to the US make up less than 3% of India's 6 million tons of basmati shipments and less than 1% of total rice exports. In simple terms, the American market is too small for India to cause any major disruption for Indian exporters. Federation President Prem Garg rejected allegations of dumping and said the US imports just about 2.7 lakh tons of rice from India annually, which is insignificant compared to India's global exports of rice. He added that even though US duties have climbed from 10% to 50% over the past 6 months, demand has not dipped. Industry voices say any further tariff hike will likely hurt US consumers more than exporters because Indian basmati and premium varieties are essential staples for Asian and Middle Eastern communities living in America. India supplies 40% of global rice exports, shipping to over 170 countries, with Gulf nations as long-time buyers and African markets growing fast. Even Russia, Brazil and Thailand are now turning to Indian basmati. Garg also said India has overtaken China as the world's largest rice producer, and output could grow further next year.
Not dumping any rice in the United States market. All Indian exports are demand driven, and the demand for Indian rice is deeply rooted into the food habits of the ethnic communities from South Asian and the Gulf region. India in the past financial year has exported basmati rice worth $337 million, weighing about 270,000 metric tons, making the US the fifth largest market for Indian basmati rice in the world. Similarly, for non-basmati rice, we have supplied around $57 million worth of goods, weighing about 61,000 metric ton, making it the 24th largest market for Indian rice. Though the US market is a substantial market for Indian rice, but the Indian rice exports are very well diversified in the world. And one market does not define our trade, it does not define our demand.
Meanwhile, even as U.S. Trade Representative, the Deputy U.S. Trade Representative Rick Switzer visits India today for ongoing discussions on bilateral trade, the Indian government says it is actively working to soften the impact of U.S. tariffs on Indian exports. In a written statement in the Lok Sabha, Minister of State for Commerce and Industry Jitin Prasada said a multi-pronged strategy is underway, including intensive talks with Washington to secure a mutually beneficial trade agreement. He added that the focus is not just on short-term relief, but also on strengthening India's trade resilience and diversifying export markets. The minister said measures such as RBI-backed trade support and the credit guarantee scheme for exporters are already being leveraged to support exporters. At the same time, India is pushing ahead with negotiations to close free trade agreements with the European Union, Peru, Chile, New Zealand and Oman. In a separate response on e-commerce policy, the minister highlighted the rise of agentic AI-powered shopping, where intelligent digital assistants can personalize and automate the buying process. He said the government is taking steps to ensure small businesses, MSMEs and local traders are not left behind as online commerce evolves. And in yet another major push to strengthen India's position in the global tech arena, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday held a marathon round of high-level meetings with the CEOs of three global technology giants, Cognizant, Microsoft and Intel. The most significant announcement came from Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, who unveiled a $17.5 billion investment, Microsoft's biggest commitment in Asia to date. Nadella called the discussions with the Prime Minister inspiring, saying Microsoft aims to support India's transition into an AI-first economy. The massive pledge is set to power India's AI growth story, from expanding cloud and supercomputing capacity to scaling AI skilling programs and building secure sovereign data systems. It's a boost that positions India as a future global hub for artificial intelligence. The Prime Minister also met Cognizant CEO Ravi Kumar S., who discussed scaling operations across India, especially at Chennai and Pune development hubs. The talks focused on job creation, digital engineering expansion and cloud capability enhancement, with Cognizant reiterating alignment with India's digital public infrastructure vision. Prime Minister Modi also met with Intel CEO Lip Bhutan, a key player for India's semiconductor ambitions. Discussions included strengthening Intel's R&D and chip design ecosystem in India, and even the feasibility of setting up a semiconductor fabrication unit under the government's incentive-backed chip mission. In a major development, the CBI has filed a criminal case against Jay Ambani, son of industrialist Anil Ambani, in connection with an alleged banking fraud linked to Reliance Housing Finance Limited. This is the first time that a criminal case has been registered against Anil Ambani's son. The FIR also names the company and its former CEO Ravindra Sudhalkar and others, including unidentified public servants. The case comes as a result from a complaint by Union Bank of India, which claimed it suffered a loss of over 228 crore rupees due to alleged cheating, conspiracy and diversion of loan funds. Remember, between 2015 and 2019, the bank sanctioned loans worth 450 crore rupees and subscribed to 100 crore rupees in debentures after the company projected strong financials. However, investigators allege the money was diverted and siphoned off instead of being used for housing finance operations. A forensic audit by Grant Thornton found that nearly 86% of corporate loans, over 12,500 crore rupees, were routed to linked entities, many allegedly used to service debt within the group. The loan account turned NPA, or a non-performing asset, in 2019. It was later declared fraud in 2024 and subsequently reported to the Reserve Bank of India. The CBI has now begun formal investigations into what officials describe as large-scale fund diversion through circular transactions, questionable lending practices and untraceable end use of money. And moving on now, India's trade unions are gearing up for a major showdown. A joint platform of central trade unions and sectoral federations has announced that they will launch a phased and sustained movement demanding the withdrawal of the labour codes. A nationwide general strike is being planned for February next year, with the exact date yet to be finalized. Now, unions say the new labour laws are anti-worker and claim widespread protests have already taken place across the country, even among non-unionized workers. The statement notes that large-scale demonstrations were seen on the 26th of November, supported by farmer groups like the Samyukta Kisan Morcha, which has been mobilizing in villages against both the seed bill and the labour codes. Trade unions allege that the government is pushing what they call false propaganda of benefits through ads and paid news, and warn that confusion is widespread in labour departments and in courts. The meeting also referred to the recent aviation crisis involving IndiGo, calling it an example of corporate negligence and a reminder of the risks of privatization. As part of their plan, unions will intensify workplace-level actions, hold rallies, door-to-door campaigns and collaborate with farmers' groups and other platforms to build momentum for the strike. Unions have appealed to opposition parties, youth and students to extend their support in what they describe as a fight to protect workers' rights. And with that, we will slip into a very short commercial break. But when we come back, we'll bring you live visuals from NSE on Meesho's IPO that lists on the stock market today. Remember, the stock is expected to list at 10 a.m., but we should be getting live visuals immediately after this break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
Powered by Servo Hypersport F5 when speed is your default.
यार सोच रहा हूँ पॉलिसी बाजार से टर्म लाइफ इंश्योरेंस ले लेता हूँ ताकि मेरे बाद फैमिली को पैसों की कमी ना। तू भी ले ले।
यार अभी तो यंग है यार, बाद में देखते हैं। आजा।
पॉलिसी बाजार पर 0 GST के साथ अब 1 करोड़ का टर्म लाइफ इंश्योरेंस सिर्फ 400 रुपए महीने से शुरू।
पेंटिंग में पहली बार बिरला ओपर्स एश्योरेंस। 1 साल में पेंट को कुछ भी हुआ तो पेंटिंग वापस करके देंगे। रजिस्टर करो birlaopus.com पर।
Welcome to a cheese spread made with pure milk. For chilly evenings. For peppery sundowners. For garlic afternoons. For tikka picnics. Welcome to Amul cheese spread. Spread the richness.
I am really motivated to grow my career, learn new skills and prove myself.
अगले हफ्ते जॉब इंटरव्यू है, इंग्लिश में प्रैक्टिस करें?
Sure, let's try some.
I want good career, new skills, खुद को प्रूव करना है.
Great, you can try. I'm really motivated to grow my career, learn new skills, and prove myself. और हाँ, तुम ये भी बता सकती हो कि इस इंडस्ट्री और इस कंपनी को लेकर तुम क्या बोल सकते हो.
Our very first Business and Economy Literature Fest 2025 on the 20th and 21st of December at Taj Talkutir, Kolkata.
EIILM presents Bomber Lorry, Associate Sponsor. Mukhora Chowk, Associate Sponsor. Alliance Broadband, Associate Sponsor.
Why is West trying to fuel anti-Russia sentiments before Putin's visit? Why is India important in this narrative war? Which are the red lines for the Russia that the West has crossed? And what is the Indian role here? One of the biggest bilateral agendas of the President Vladimir Putin's state visit to India. Fighters are on the agenda, sources are saying.
It is about 17 Mach of the terminal velocity. No one can shoot it down.
Local production at HAL's Nashik facility that begins on December 4th is greater defense cooperation. Is it correct to say that the S-500 are a completely different ballgame? The Su-57 represents Russia's leap into fifth generation technology.
They always give us the contemporary technology.
Do you think that Zelensky really underestimated the Russian resolve? That Trump is not deeply invested in NATO? Do you think that if there's a peace deal, if something happens, if there's a breakthrough, what will be the future of NATO? Russians are always available to us in the context of the transfer of technology.
Welcome back. You're watching News9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Time now to move to all the action from the stock markets. First, let's begin with Wall Street. Well, Wall Street ended slightly lower on Tuesday as investors brace for a potentially hawkish Federal Reserve, even if it cuts rates this week. JP Morgan dragged the S&P 500 after warning of sharply higher expenses for 2026. Take a look.
Wall Street's main indexes ended mixed and somewhat muted on Tuesday, with the Dow dropping more than 0.33%, the S&P 500 edging slightly into the red, and the Nasdaq ticking up marginally. The Federal Reserve kicked off its two-day policy meeting on Tuesday, with traders widely expecting a 0.25 percentage point rate cut at its conclusion. While inflation hovers above the Fed's annual target of 2%, policymakers remain more concerned about the health of the labor market. But Andre Skiba, head of U.S. fixed income at RBC Global Asset Management, notes that recent data suggests the labor market may be relatively stable.
We also got actually some recent positive data points like the JOLTS number indicating an increase in the number of job openings in the US. And that is the reason why we're erring on the side of Federal Reserve cutting rates this time, however, with messaging that suggests that they might be done for a while and they want to assess incoming data early in 26 to determine whether another cut is necessary or not.
Stocks on the move Tuesday included JP Morgan Chase, which shed more than 4.5% for its biggest one-day percentage drop since April 4th. The bank said it expects expenses to climb to about $105 billion in 2026, driven largely by growth and volume-related costs. Shares of Campbell's shed more than 5% after the packaged food maker said it selectively raised prices to counter higher costs. And AutoZone's shares lost more than 7% after the retailer missed quarterly sales and profit estimates.
All right, and from Wall Street, let's shift focus to Dalal Street, and market seems to be in a completely flat tone this morning. It started with a little bit of flattish red tone to it and has since inched up just marginally in the green territory this morning. Let's pull up the Nifty 50 heat map and see which are the sectors which are leading the mood of the market this morning, if at all you can call it a mood, and it's pretty much a mixed bag. You're seeing the IT space a little bit dashing in green this morning. HCL Tech and Wipro are both in the positive territory. comfortably in the positive territory. Meanwhile, Reliance Industries as well as Coal India from the Nifty 50 Energy Pack looking in healthy territory, at least as far as trade in the first few minutes of market open pan out. Meanwhile, mixed signals coming from the banking side. HDFC Bank is up marginally. ICICI Bank is down marginally, just about 1/5 of a percentage point or so. You're seeing better gains coming in from Kotak Mahindra and Bajaj Finserv as far as this pack goes. Then moving on to the auto segment, well, this has been a territory which has seen a lot of profit booking over the last 2 or 3 trading sessions, but you're seeing a little bit of recovery this morning in Maruti Suzuki and a much better recovery in Mahindra and Mahindra stocks. M&M is up about 0.7% right now as we speak. In other heavyweights on the Nifty 50, Bharti Airtel is down about 0.5 percentage point. Sun Pharma down about 0.25 percentage point. No real signals, no real trend lines visible at the moment because the stress on the market or the upside on the market does not seem to be confirming to any one particular sectoral trend this morning. Let's pull up the charts to see what are the trading levels right now for the Nifty 50 and Sensex. Well, Sensex is squarely below that 85,800 mark, even about 10 minutes or so into market open, still at about 84,792 points or so. Nifty 50 a good 130 points away from that psychological 26,000 level. Volatility in the Indian market slightly higher than at this time yesterday, but well below the 11 mark. Not the best news seem to be taken. Gaurang, thank you so much. Pleasure having you back on News 9 on the morning brief after a while. Just want to understand, yesterday, of course, was the Nifty 50 expiry, so the kind of cuts that we saw were understandable. But this morning, we aren't really seeing too much momentum. What is holding back investors at this moment?
Thank you so much, Karthik, for having me back again in this show. It's good to speak to you on your channel. A small regulatory disclosure that whatever recommendations that we are going to share this morning on your show are a part of our research team recommendations, fundamental side, long term. Our company, Jyojit or I, we do not have any personal investments, no financial interest, no conflict of interest, but we share similar advice with our clients. They might have their investment interest. So I think markets, Karthik, it's good to see a lighter shade of green rather than a deep red. What we've been witnessing since the time we hit the new all-time high, I think the markets have given up the steam and the enthusiasm, and we are way below the all-time highs that we made of about 26,300 as marginally above that. A reason one to many, continuous relentless selling from the FIs, and of course, despite of the strong domestic data points that we had on the GDP, on the inflation, as well as a quarter basis cut, 25 basis point cut on the interest front, markets don't look so excited. I think markets are taking a breather, and historically, Karthik, whenever the markets have made a new all-time high, they go into a little bit of profit booking sideways, range-bound territory, make a strong base and then try to move upwards. So I guess we should be ready to spend the rest of the year around these levels, marginally above these levels, and possibly next year could bring in some more cheer. 10th January onwards, we'll have the curtain raiser for the third quarter opening, earnings season, and of course, then we'll have the budget.
Absolutely. But Gaurang, I want to understand, is there any impact that the Indian markets are likely to witness towards end of the week or early next week, given the stance that the US Federal Reserve takes? Is that something, let's say it goes ahead and gives that much awaited rate cut to the US economy, is that something which is likely to impact the Indian markets one way or another?
So Karthik, I think largely 25 basis point cut, according to whatever my networking sources tell me, is priced into the market. And I don't think, I guess, I'm not too sure, but this is going to be one of the last policies that Mr. Powell is going to announce as Fed chair. Next year, early, as the President of United States of America has been vocal enough that he's going to find a new replacement. Don't know how things are going to shape up over there. But his commentary is something that everyone would be eager to listen into, Karthik, given the state of economy and affairs in the United States of America, the tariff-related inflationary pressures, if any, and of course, more importantly, it's going to be the data on the employment front, which will possibly be eagerly awaited. So I don't think there's going to be a major reaction to our markets or global markets on fallback of the Fed announcement.
All right. Gaurang, you also mentioned right at the start of the show that that your advice is fundamentally long-term in nature. So for the retail investor, which has pretty much held fort and held the markets from whatever catastrophe that could have happened with the FPS pulling out. For the retail investors looking at the long-term story at the end of 2025, getting into 2026, are there any sectors that you can pinpoint which should be on their radar, which they should focus on? Because it seems that the bellwethers of yesteryears, the IT services, pact, for example, is not delivering, much returns for the long-term investor, at least this entire calendar year. Are there sectors on the horizon which you think investors should be watchful of as they enter 2026?
Sure, Karthik. So I think despite of the relentless FI/FPI selling, we managed to make a new all-time high, right? So that's the internal strength, inherent strength that we have in terms of the emerging market and one of the most fastest growing economy as far as the EM basket is concerned.
Right.
So yes, there are about 4 or 5 sectors that we have listed down, not with respect to any short-term, medium-term or budget outlook, because a lot of people have been asking me, what is your budget outlook and what does one look at? So budget is a very short-term phenomena. It happens every year, Karthik, as we all know. But longish, I think in the entire BFSI segment, that is your private sector bank, public sector bank, strong NBFCs, defense, cap goods, engineering, capital market related stocks, autos, and the sector that you mentioned, which has been underperforming, but we are very optimistic, that is IT. And second quarter was a shade better than what the street estimated. So these are some 5 or 6 sectors one should look at.
All right. So BFSI, defense, auto, well, these seem to be some of the sectors that Gaurang Shah is bullish on. What about what we are seeing on, the buzz on IPOs? In fact, right now, let's cut across to Vidit Atre. Meesho is expected to list in just a few minutes or so from now. He's speaking live at NSE. Let's quickly listen in, Gaurang, to what Vidit Atre is saying before we come back and discuss the IPO story.
And I can go on and on and on. This team believed in things that no one else before them believed in. So this IPO is your victory. This listing is the compound interest of all your hard work. Thank you so much. I think today is a big day when we transition from being a private startup to now a public company. And that expands our responsibility in a big way. Until now, we answered to a few shareholders, private shareholders. Now we answer to all of you. We answer to that retail investor in a small town who bought our few shares because they believe in the future of Indian consumption, in the future of Bharat consumption. So I think as the management team of Meesho, on behalf of all of them, I want to take a pledge today. I want to tell all of them, we will operate with transparency, we will operate with governance, and most importantly, we'll operate with a long-term view.
All right, Gaurang Shah continues to be with us. Gaurang, interesting words coming, big words really, talking about governance, talking about transparency, and talking about India's booming consumption there. So Meesho IPO, GMP at about 47 rupees, that's about 32% or so gain, listing day gain expected, for investors who have been allotted those shares. But overall, there's also a concern that IPOs, a flurry of IPOs through November and December has pretty much sucked out a lot of cash from the market, which could have otherwise been invested back in listed entities. And that may have possibly given a fillip to stock markets. Is that a sort of realistic, justified theory?
I wouldn't say completely, but maybe marginally, Karthik.
Okay.
And look, even before this, we've had a history of IPOs hitting the market with larger, funds to be garnered from the IPO market. But even then, despite of that strong primary market, the secondary market has been able to survive.
Okay.
And it is not very, very long ago, Karthik, that we made a new lifetime high. So I don't think there is any dearth of liquidity in the market. One may put out a case maybe to marginally credit the IPO flurry. And this week, in fact, there is a flood of IPO and there is a lot of listing also of already the IPOs which have been concluded.
That's right.
So I don't think there is any liquidity dearth. Maybe, a little bit, like I mentioned, historically, every time the market has made a new all-time high, they go into a little bit of profit booking range bound mode.
All right. I want to just stick to the Meesho IPO for a minute because this is another sort of pure play consumer facing brand. We've seen Grow, we've seen Lenskart, we've seen a lot of consumer facing brands really come on to the stock markets and have their stocks listed. Meesho pretty much seems to be one of the only pure play e-commerce companies in India which has gone ahead and listed itself, been willing to open its books to public scrutiny, and with it out there talking about transparency and governance issues. Now, Meesho as a bet, or India's e-commerce market as a bet, is this something that you at Jyojit are bullish about, the India e-commerce story?
So first of all, Karthik, I think it's very pleasing to hear the kind of words that we just listened into in terms of corporate responsibility, ethics, and transparency. Yes, we had a subscribe recommendation for Meesho from a long-term point of view, and one of the things that I like the most about the IPO is there is no hidden cost, or there is no, unlike your platform fees or your delivery fees or handling fees. I don't think Meesho has any of them. So that's a lot of transparency over there. And I think what the customer sees on the screen is the value he or she pays finally when he or she places the order. So I guess, yes, we have been positive of new age high-tech companies, but at the same time, in the same breath, Karthik, just to caution the viewers of your channel, don't rush into all the IPOs with huge expectation and listing gains. Some of them may disappoint you because every business, every management valuation differs.
Right. So for valuation specifically on Meesho, what would be the closest competitors, Gaurang, that you would recommend for people to watch out for those PEs? Would it be an Eternal and a Swiggy, or should they take cue from, let's say, the Amazons of the world listed globally?
So let Amazon come and get itself listed. We'll comment then. But yeah, from the other names that you mentioned, Eternal is something that we've been extremely positive. Other than that, Policy Bazaar, Paytm, Nikea, FNS e-commerce, that is, we remain positive on all these names, Karthik.
All right, Gaurang, well, let us leave it at that. But thank you so much for all your time and your inputs this morning. Pleasure having you back here with us on News9 on Morning Brief at 9. Well, with that, we will slip into another short break. But before that, here are some of the other global headlines that we're tracking for you this morning. US President Donald Trump ramps up attack on America's oldest ally, slamming Europe's immigration stance and Ukraine policy as decaying and weak, deepening or already widening the transatlantic rift. Trump administration confirms the US Food and Drug Administration is conducting a broad investigation into deaths potentially linked to COVID-19 vaccines, a move likely to reignite political and scientific debate. US President Donald Trump pushes back against voter anger over living costs, claiming consumer prices are dropping tremendously despite data showing persistent inflation pressures. Canada launches a $1.2 billion program to lure top global scientists, targeting researchers seeking to leave the US over Trump policies and intensifying the North American brain gain battle. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's prepared to hold fresh elections if Western allies can guarantee security as diplomacy to end Russia's near 4-year war intensifies. Europe's central bank reportedly plans to simplify rules on capital buffers required of banks, pruning some of the complex regulation put in place after the global financial crisis. European Union launches formal investigation into whether Google's use of news publisher content and YouTube data to train its AI systems violates EU competition rules, sharply escalating regulatory pressure on big tech. French Parliament narrowly backs Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu's social security budget plan, helping him inch towards completing France's 2026 spending package by the end of the year. And Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the country is taking back control from big tech as new social media laws kick in, forcing platforms to remove users under 16 and marking the toughest youth online safety rules anywhere in the world. We'll get you these stories after a break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
एसोसिएट स्पॉन्सर बैंक ऑफ बड़ौदा से लोन लेना एक मास्टर स्ट्रोक है।
हर स्वाद में बसा, हर दाद में बसा, ये मेरा चीज है।
50 सालों से जो बना इस देश की शान, वो है अमूल चीज।
25 लाख का हॉस्पिटल बिल है, इतने पैसे कहाँ से आएंगे?
पैसों की चिंता आप मत कीजिए पापा।
मैम, सर का हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस क्लेम अप्रूव हो गया है।
आप
पॉलिसी बाजार।
पॉलिसी बाजार पर 0 GST के साथ अब 1 करोड़ का हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस सिर्फ 550 रुपए महीने से शुरू।
A resurgent India is racing towards the Viksit Bharat goal, braving global economic headwinds. Bulletproofing our economy from these uncertainties are Bharat's homegrown businesses. Powered by tech-led innovation, Indian entrepreneurs are truly scaling up, riding the next wave of disruption with AI and cloud to break into the big global league. TV9 Network in association with SAP presents Visionaries of Viksit Bharat, a series celebrating inspirational business leaders shaping tomorrow. Watch them take an iconic leap at Visionaries of Viksit Bharat conclaves. Exclusively on News9.
यही मौका है बिजनेस को बढ़ाने का, पर पैसा।
अपनी सुपर पावर यूज करने का टाइम आ गया है।
आप टेंशन मत लीजिए, IIFL फाइनेंस से झटपट गोल्ड लोन लीजिए और बिजनेस आगे बढ़ाइए।
आपके जैसे सुपर हीरोज ऐसी छोटी मोटी प्रॉब्लम से थोड़ी ना रुकते हैं, इसीलिए लाइफ जब भी आगे बढ़ने का मौका दे तो अपनी सुपर पावर, अपना गोल्ड यूज करिए और IIFL फाइनेंस से गोल्ड लोन लीजिए। IIFL फाइनेंस करता है सीधी बात।
Welcome back. You're watching News9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Let's shift our focus now to all that's happening around the world. Let's begin, as always, with the United States. US President Donald Trump has issued some of his sharpest criticism yet of Europe, calling the continent decaying and weak on immigration and on its handling of the Ukraine war. In an interview with the US Daily, this is what Trump said. Now, Trump took aim at European governments over the Russia-Ukraine conflict at a time when divisions are widening over a US-drafted peace plan. Many European leaders fear the proposal could pressure Kyiv into giving up territory seized by Russia since its full-scale invasion in 2022. Trump's remarks further strain relations between Washington and its closest allies as it comes just days after the US administration released a revised national security strategy that warned of so-called civilizational erasure. Civilizational erasure is what Trump called it in Europe to urge a tougher stance on migration. Now, the comments have deepened alarm across European capitals, with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron raising eyebrows over the US President's latest remarks. US healthcare major CVS Health says its 2026 profit will beat Wall Street expectations, signaling progress in the company's turnaround strategy. The company on Tuesday also said it is offering a new artificial intelligence-driven platform that aims to bring its various services, including its health insurance, pharmacy, and healthcare delivery offerings, into one single app.
Shares of CVS rose as much as 5% Tuesday morning after the company said it expects its 2026 profit to rise and top Wall Street estimates. It also raised its 2025 profit outlook for the fourth time. CEO David Joyner said at the company's investor day that CVS has delivered on its promises this year and will now focus on improving consumer experiences across the business. He added, quote, "We've invested heavily in what I would believe is the challenge in the marketplace, which is a lack of trust." The upbeat outlook caps a year in which Joyner pushed through a sweeping overhaul, which involved cutting costs, exiting underperforming markets, and strengthening management to revive investor confidence. CVS shares have responded, with gains of more than 70% this year. CVS said in May that it plans to exit the market for Obamacare health insurance plans in 2026, as rising medical costs have pressured health insurers in recent quarters. The company expects its Aetna insurance business and CVS Caremark Pharmacy Benefit Management Unit to drive growth, as their profit margins are expected to return to target levels. Analysts at Leerink Partners said in a note that, quote, "CVS's near-term momentum should set the stage for what remains a robust growth recovery story."
And US President Donald Trump said late Sunday that Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky could choose to end the war with Russia almost immediately, but retaking Russian-occupied Crimea or joining NATO are off the table. Now, this comes as Zelensky agreed to hold fresh elections in the country and send a revised peace proposal to Washington to end the long-standing conflict with Russia.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continued his shuttle diplomacy Tuesday with a visit to Rome to meet with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Zelensky says Ukraine and its European partners will soon be ready to present the U.S. with refined documents on a peace plan to end the war with Russia. Kyiv is under pressure from the White House to secure a quick peace, but is pushing back on a U.S.-backed plan proposed last month that is widely seen as favorable to Moscow. Ukrainian officials are also seeking strong security guarantees from partners in the event of a deal to prevent Russia from attacking again in the future. President Donald Trump's envoys have given Zelensky days to respond to a proposed peace agreement that would see Ukraine accept territorial losses in return for unspecified U.S. security guarantees. That's according to a report in the Financial Times on Tuesday. Zelensky said in a statement that new components of the deal hashed out with the British, French, and German leaders in London on Monday were more developed and ready for U.S. review. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said Ukraine must hand over its entire eastern Donbass region before Russia stops fighting, something which Zelensky has consistently rejected, while Trump said in an interview with Politico that Zelensky would have to get on the ball and start accepting things.
All right, in other news from Europe, the European Commission has launched an antitrust probe into whether Google is misusing online content from publishers and YouTube to train its AI systems. Use probing whether Google might be distorting competition by imposing unfair terms and conditions on publishers and content creators, or by granting itself privileged access to their output. Take a look.
The European Commission has opened an antitrust probe to assess whether Google is breaching EU competition rules. That's in its use of online content from web publishers and YouTube for artificial intelligence purposes. The Commission announced the news on Tuesday. It said the investigation will examine whether Google is distorting competition by imposing unfair conditions on publishers and content creators, or by granting itself privileged access to such content and placing developers of rival AI models at a disadvantage. The Commission further said it was concerned Google may have used content from web publishers to generate AI-powered services on its search results pages. That's without appropriate compensation to publishers and without offering them the possibility to refuse such use of their content. The Commission added it's also looking at whether Google has used content uploaded to YouTube to train its own AI models, and without offering creators compensation or the possibility to refuse.
The European Central Bank is expected to propose simpler capital buffer rules for banks, responding to complaints that current regulations are overly complex and put EU lenders at a disadvantage to their US competitors. More details in this next report.
The European Central Bank will take a step towards simpler, not looser, bank rules this week. That's according to sources Tuesday. They said the ECB will pitch simplifying rules on the capital buffers banks should have to protect themselves from potential shocks. It would cut some of the complex regulation put in place after the global financial crisis. ECB Vice President Luis de Guindos is due to present the proposals Thursday. A spokesperson for the ECB declined to comment on Tuesday's report. The sources said the change would merge two key buffers that separate capital requirements set by national supervisors. The buffers were introduced by the EU as part of a post-crisis overhaul to stop another banking sector meltdown like that seen from 2007 to 2008. The shift is a more conservative approach than regulators in Britain and the US have taken recently. It may also disappoint bankers who hoped the EU might go further. Bankers complain the current rules are too complex and put them at a disadvantage to US peers, particularly at a time when Donald Trump's administration is leading a drive to deregulate. While last week the Bank of England cut its estimate of how much capital lenders need to hold, which was its first reduction since the crisis. It aims to boost credit and support growth.
And BMW has appointed Milan Devalkovic as its new CEO as the German automaker launches its next era of autonomous, ambitious models while battling fierce competition from China and high US tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. Milan has been a member of the board of management of BMW AG since 2019 and is currently responsible for the production division.
BMW has a new CEO. The German auto giant's supervisory board announced Tuesday Milan Nedeljkovic will take over from May next year. He'll replace current head Oliver Zipser, who will resign before Nedeljkovic takes charge. BMW said Nedeljkovic is 56 years old and currently head of production. It added he's worked with the carmaker for more than 30 years. BMW is gearing up to launch a new range of models in a competitive market. Nedeljkovic will head a carmaker fighting against tough competition from China and high US tariffs. Those challenges saw the luxury carmaker cut its earnings forecast for the year in October. It's also betting on the first model from the all-electric Neue Klasse series to drive growth next year.
Another German industry giant, ThyssenKrupp, expects to swing to a net loss of up to 800 million euros in 2026, blaming restructuring costs at its steel division. The unit is trying to sell to India's Jindal Steel International. Take a look.
ThyssenKrupp expects to swing to a net loss of up to $931 million next year. The German engineering giant blamed restructuring provisions at its steel unit, which it's trying to sell to India's Jindal Steel International. ThyssenKrupp has tried to divest the division for years, but efforts have collapsed mainly due to pension liabilities of $3.14 billion that are tied to the business. It said losses this year have been due to exposure to fierce Asian competition, US tariffs, and a generally weak European economy. The trend has impacted most of ThyssenKrupp's units. Investors didn't like what they heard on Tuesday, and shares dropped as much as 13% in early trade before scaling back. Adjusted operating profit is expected to be between $582 million to over $1.05 billion in 2026. That's below the $1.07 billion forecast in a company-provided poll.
And finally, from NVIDIA's booming China business to a new wave of futuristic robos, we take you through the tech moments that defined this week. Take a look.
From NVIDIA getting a Chinese bonus but with a price to eye-catching robots, this is Tech Weekly. NVIDIA can sell its second-best AI chips to China but with a price. US President Donald Trump confirmed Washington will allow the sale of H200 processors but collect a 25% fee on such sales. It's higher than the 15% levy suggested in August. The White House said it will be collected as an import tax from Taiwan, where the chips are made, before they undergo US security checks and head to China. Australia is on course to ban under-16s from using social media. It would make it the first country to bring in a minimum age for social media use, and could lead to fines of around $33 million if 10 of the biggest platforms, including Meta and TikTok, don't follow along. Major tech firms and free speech advocates have criticised the move, but parents and child advocates have praised it. China's land space rocket failed to complete its reusable rocket test. The firm had hoped to become the third company after SpaceX and Blue Origin to successfully test a reusable spacecraft. State media said the Zhuzhe 3 rocket couldn't complete a controlled landing following an initial launch. The latest advances in robotic technology were on show in Japan at the International Robot Exhibition. Some were able to show their rescue capabilities during disasters, while others danced and served up drinks. Some, like Kawasaki Corporation's Kaleido 9 robots, could one day be used in disaster areas where human access is difficult. And India is reviewing a proposal about greater phone location surveillance. That's according to documents, emails and 5 sources. The pitch is from the telecom industry to force smartphone firms to enable satellite location tracking. Tech majors, including Apple, Google and Samsung, have all opposed the move due to privacy concerns.
And with that, we come to an end of this edition of Morning Brief at 9. If you have been, thank you so much for watching. But news continues right here on News9. So don't go anywhere and stay tuned.
एसोसिएट स्पॉन्सर बैंक ऑफ बड़ौदा से लोन लेना एक मास्टर स्ट्रोक है।
Every brand tells a story. And they are the story.